We're also going to take a look at Joel Osteen. Joel Osteen is someone that I had an impression of, an idea of who he was, without ever reading his books or ever listening to a message of his on television. That was completely unfair, and I acknowledge that. About a year and a half ago, my wife and I were sitting down to watch some TV, and I came across Joel Osteen on one of the channels. We stopped. I said, you know what, let's listen to him and see what he has to say. That message that he gave, he was talking about the power of our words. I think that may have been the title of his sermon, actually, the power of words. And he was talking about if you say something over and over again, it will come to pass. He compared himself to a friend of his that he had in high school. Now, this high school player was quarterback for the football team, athletic, good-looking, everything was going great. When he met him years later, he was fat, bald, and had no money to speak of. Joel Osteen said that's because this man constantly viewed himself as fat and bald and poor. He says the moment that you speak something out, you give birth to it. This is a spiritual principle, and it works whether what you are saying is good or bad, positive or negative. Doesn't this sound a bit like positive confession? Doesn't it sound a bit like the teachings of Phineas Quimby and from New Age books such as The Secret and others? Osteen is also an expert at scriptural twisting. At first I thought it was naivete and he didn't understand the Bible very well, and that's why he made some of the mistakes that he makes. But as I've watched him over the hours, I see him finding verses, taking them out of context, changing key prepositions to get across the message that he wants to get across, which is that you have the power within you to determine your best life now. That is his message. It's about words. An example of one of these scriptural twistings, and we'll look at many more, is the story of Zechariah. Zechariah, when he heard that he and his wife were going to have a child, didn't believe it. He received this message directly from the angel Gabriel. Joel says the reason that Zechariah's speech was taken away is because his negative words would have stopped the miracle that God was about to do in his life by giving them a son named John. That's the reason he was rendered mute, so that his negative words wouldn't cancel out God's plan. That's how powerful our words are. Another area where Joel goes horribly wrong is in the area of the atonement. Scripturally, and we can talk about this and defend it, atonement occurred on the cross. It was through the death of Christ that atonement was accomplished. Christ himself said it on the cross, "It is finished." However, Joel teaches it wasn't finished until Christ went down to hell to have a fight with Satan. It was there, in that fight with Satan, when he beat him and had Satan bruised and wounded and defeated, that our sin was atoned for. But in fact, he goes back on that even further. Apparently, it wasn't done until Christ ascended into heaven bodily to present his blood before the throne. It was at that time that the atonement was accomplished. This may seem like an insignificant issue, but when you start playing with the work of Christ on the cross, when you start playing with the creative nature of God and the limited nature of man, and reversing those two roles, you have significantly deviated from true Christianity, and you've started teaching a false gospel.